Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody. I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Mac Prichard. Mac is the founder and publisher of Mac's List, a job board and career hub for the Pacific Northwest with a mission to create more human hiring processes to improve the workforce for all. Mac's List was founded in Portland, Oregon in 2001 and became a certified B Corporation in 2017. Today, Mac's List serves job seekers and employers in Oregon and Washington with their top-tier job board, as well as courses, books, events, and other resources that bring people together to find better jobs and happier careers. Mac built 2 small businesses on the strength of his professional network, and he has taught thousands of people how to grow their careers through relationships with others. Mac shows job seekers and employers how to break down the barriers between them by teaching empathy, curiosity, and people-focused hiring with a practical nuts and bolts style. Mac is also the author of the book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere, and host of the weekly career advice podcast, Find Your Dream Job. Please join me in welcoming Mac Prichard.
Well, thank you, Tammy. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It's a pleasure to have you. As our listeners may or may not know, I had the pleasure of being on your show probably, about a year ago or so.
You were on the program. It was a great conversation, and people continued to download that episode, Tammy. So there's a lot of interest in what you had to say, and I know people learned a lot from your advice.
Oh, well, thank you. So, as you know, Mac, this is a podcast, Work from the Inside Out. It's all about the kinds of transitions that people have made in their professional lives and the decisions that they've made along the way. Tell us, I know you've made a number of transitions in your professional life. Tell us a little bit about your background and the kinds of changes that you've made along the way.
I'm happy to. I just celebrated my 61st birthday on Tuesday. So I've been in the workplace for 40 years now, Tammy.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And when I got out of college a long time ago, I knew I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to get paid to write, I wanted to do human rights advocacy, and I wanted to work in politics. And I couldn't have said it that succinctly then, but I've been fortunate to do all 3 of those things during the course of my career, as well as many other jobs and opportunities. And along the way, I've had to make some big transitions and changes. So I'm pleased to have an opportunity to talk about that. But I'm also, like your listeners, grateful that you're sharing these stories, because we're all going to change not only jobs a number of times during the course of a career, but we're going to change our professions and our careers several times as well.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that unlike maybe what some of our parents did, many of whom stayed in the same job or maybe changed careers maybe once in their lifetime, I think we do live, our generation and generations after us will change many more times.
Yeah, it's a fact.
Yeah. So where did you go to school and where did you begin? I'm curious geographically, because I know I just recently discovered that you lived in the Boston area for a while.
I did live in Boston. I grew up in eastern Iowa, and I went to college at the University of Iowa. I earned a bachelor's in political science with a minor in Latin American studies. And growing up in Iowa, you get the political bug. It's kind of like being in Boston, in that in Iowa, because of the caucuses, presidential candidates every 4 years come through. So I used to skip high school to check out candidates, and I had a mother who was involved in politics and was on the bargaining team for her local union. And so I had, for both of my parents, service and involvement in the community were important values.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that inspired my my college studies, and after graduation, I did go east. I worked in Washington, D.C. for 2 years for a human rights organization where I learned public affairs skills, how to talk to reporters, how to write, how to work with legislative staff on Capitol Hill. And that led to a job in Boston with another human rights organization where we took members of Congress on fact-finding trips to Central America. This was back in the 1980s.
Wow.
Yeah, and I left that position when the program ended, and I worked on a congressional race across the Charles in Cambridge for Joe Kennedy, the father, not the son, who currently has the congressional seat. And then I was the first spokesperson for Boston's Big Dig.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, that must have been very interesting.
it was, and that was my first big career change. I was in my mid-20s because I went from working in the world of human rights advocacy and U.S. Latin American policy, which were my first two jobs, to first a congressional race and then making the switch to state and local government. So that job at the Big Dig led to a position in state government. I was a spokesperson for a state agency that resettled refugees in Massachusetts, and then went to graduate school, got a master's in public administration, and then came to Oregon to work in politics and government out here. And today I run a public relations company that serves public agencies, foundations, and nonprofits. That's one small business. And I also own a second business, a regional job board that helps people find fulfilling work and helps employers find talented workers in Oregon and Washington.
What a rich career. So I'm curious, as you made these transitions from public affairs in DC, you were a young, very young man, to Boston, and you were working on U.S. and Latin America policy. You were taking elected officials on trips to Latin America.
Yeah, the reason we did it was the organization. It was the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which is the service
Yep.
branch of the Unitarian Universalist Church, had run development programs in Central America. And this was in the 1980s. And you'll recall that there were civil wars going on, first in El Salvador, but then in Guatemala. And there'd been a revolution in Nicaragua. There was a lot of violence happening in the region. And my boss, who ran the development programs, thought that if policymakers could meet and talk to the same people that he was talking with, they would come to different conclusions about U.S. Latin American policy there. So we would arrange all the official appointments with the president of the country and cabinet ministers and the U.S. ambassador. But the real value we offered was we had relationships in the Catholic Church among grassroots groups that the U.S. State Department just didn't have close ties with.
That's really interesting because I would assume that the State Department would be trying to orchestrate those kinds of trips, but it sounds like it was almost a more neutral entity to do it through the church.
Yes, and I want to be clear that the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee was a nonprofit organization. It was not sectarian, though it was an arm of the Unitarian Universalist Association.
Mm-hmm.
And the State Department does support members of Congress when they go on these trips. The acronym for them are CODELs, and we did work with the local embassy and the State Department on those official trips. We had good relationships with them, but it was the access that we had to people that the U.S. government either couldn't reach out to. For example, we would set up meetings in a third country with leaders of the armed opposition. So we were able to arrange meetings with rebel leaders in El Salvador and Guatemala. And we could also set up meetings with the Contras who were fighting the Sandinista government in Nicaragua.
Wow. Oh, is that all?
Well, I do want to pause, Tammy. And sometimes when I just give the headlines about my career, people think, wow,
yeah,
you've had so much success. But I also want to point out I've had 2 long periods of unemployment. I know I've cashed the last unemployment check uh, once, and I came within the second time I was out of work, I came within one check of doing it again. So I know what it's like to go through a long period of unemployment. I know what it's like to struggle with getting clear about your goals and to send out a lot of applications and not hear from people. And and that's part of what inspires the work that we do at the regional job board, because there's a story behind how that got going that we can talk about, but it's at the root of it is wanting to be of service to others, and it's also about the value of networking. You to serve others helps you build relationships that will help you not only help others but help your career.
Yeah. Well, we will definitely get to that. I want to though I want to unpack a little bit some of those earlier years and how that progressed. Um, between this range of different positions that you held. I mean, they were all in one way or another tapping into your communication skills, let's say, and yet they were putting you in different parts of the world and putting you in um, different types of, I would say, high stress situations. When I think about the trips to Central America, Latin America, and then being a spokesperson for a congressional candidate, and then being spokesperson for the Big Dig. I was living in Boston at that time. And I think about all those different situations, the big difference between a congressional race and the Big Dig in terms of on the surface. But I can imagine all those different choices and jobs. I mean, yes, you were hired, but you chose to accept those different roles. I'm curious about what it was like for you and what made you decide to move from one role to another.
Well, they were. I've had a lot of stressful jobs, and now I'm self-employed, and you never quite shake off the job when you go home. Whether you're a solopreneur or you're running a small business with a number of employees, as I do, I I'm comfortable with that kind of stress. I think because of the opportunities I've had, and I've learned how to manage it. I would say the choices I've made, when you look at all the different jobs I've had, there is, in addition to the common denominator that runs through them all, is wanting to make a difference about issues I care about or in the community where I live and work. I mentioned earlier being out of work. When I I thought job hunting in my 20s, Tammy, was just an easy thing to do because I had 3 great jobs right out of the gate. Right after graduating from the University of Iowa, I worked on a U.S. Senate race for 6 months. I found that job through a classified ad. Uh, and then when I went east to Washington, D.C., I worked for the human rights group where I'd had an internship. And so they knew me and offered me a position. And then I found the position in Boston with helping with the congressional fact-finding trips through a referral. So I thought finding work was easy. And what I didn't understand was how important it was when you were considering making a switch in your focus to get clear about your goals. And the
Mm.
reason I bring that up is I left the human rights organization in Boston after 4 years, and it's a
Ah.
great experience. And I thought, well, I won't have any trouble finding my next job. And I was out of work for 6 months.
Oh, so you chose to leave
I did.
that role without something else lined up.
I did. And I think uh, you, I think that can work if you know what you want to do next. And what I struggled with was I wasn't clear about my goals. So I
Mm.
would see, and again, this was in the 1980s, so the way people would look for work then, uh, if they wanted to look at publicly posted positions, was to get the newspaper. So every Sunday, I'd get the Boston Globe. I'd circle the 5 or 6 jobs in the classified ads that I thought were either interesting or that I was qualified for. I'd send off the resumes on Sunday or Monday, and they were generic. Uh, but I would get responses occasionally, and even interviews. But I never got an offer, Tammy, because I was applying for jobs I could do. Well, I could be a fundraiser. Oh, I could work on a weekly magazine. Oh, I could manage communications for Boston's Computer Museum. And I had the skills on paper to do those things. But once I got into the interview room, it was clear, I see now, to the interviewer that I didn't know what I wanted next. And when you're unclear about your goals, that's a challenge because you apply everywhere. The other problem that you'll face is you're competing against candidates who know exactly what they want to do. And so they're going to be very confident and more successful in the interviews because they've done the hard work to get clear about their goals, and they know that that's the place they want to be.
And I want to sort of offer even another definition around that. When you say clear about your goals, it's really being clear about your why, right? Clear about why you want to do these things, not just clear about the what you can. It's like, I can do this, I can do that. As you just said, there were a lot of things you were capable of doing, but if you couldn't convey to an employer why you wanted to do it or why it was important to you or what value you could offer them, then you were definitely going to lose out to another candidate who could express a level of deeper interest and commitment to that, right?
And I would encourage your listeners to reflect, because I'm guessing many, if not all of them, have been on interview panels or done their own share of hiring. And when they think about the 3 to 5 candidates they might meet for a position, the ones who say things like, well, I'm keeping my options open. I could do this job. I want to learn more about it. They don't make it to the next round. It's the people who ask questions about the challenges you face as a manager, who then provide examples of how they've dealt with similar issues in the past and tie that back to their own professional goals and show how working for that manager is going to help them move ahead in the career. Those are the people who get offers. So I say all that because that was a eye-opening lesson for me, a painful one to learn in my mid-20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I only got out, I struggled with what to do next. But at the end of that 6 months, I got the job at the Boston's Big Dig, which at the time was America's largest public works project. And it was a position that was never posted.
That's interesting. It was never posted, huh?
Well, like many jobs, it was filled by referrals. And as you know, there are estimates out there that anywhere between 40 to 80% of all positions are never advertised.
Right.
So they're part of what some people call a hidden job market. I found out about that position, Tammy, not because I was politically well connected or I knew people, the Speaker of the House, but because I did informational interviews, and I arranged those conversations because I wanted to learn. I decided that what I wanted to do was communications in state and local government in Massachusetts, which was a switch from doing advocacy work on behalf of U.S. Latin American policy organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out and I talked to people who were doing communications in state and local government, and I asked them about opportunities that were coming up, about how I could best position myself as a candidate and talk about my transferable skills. And over the course of 2 months, I learned about the opportunity at the Big Dig, and I got an offer. And, there were several other people competing for the job, but all of us heard about the opportunity by referrals. And I was a much better candidate, and I got an offer because I had a clear goal. And I'd spent time talking to people who worked in communications in government, and I had a better understanding of what those jobs required and how to demonstrate that my skills were not only transferable, they were superior to my competitors for the position.
So at some point you did, it sounds like you did some inner work or some soul searching, that you decided to step away from some of the advocacy work and wanted to explore more of the sort of public sector realm, and that communications work at that angle. What brought that about for you?
Being out of work for 6 months, cashing that last unemployment check, being frustrated that what I was doing in my job search wasn't working. Those were the things that inspired me to action.
Hmm.
Like many people, even today, I thought the way you look for work was to respond to public postings.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was newspaper ads. Today, it's listings on job boards. And
Right.
you should look at those
Yeah.
advertisements. But again, so many jobs are filled by referrals. So I was stuck. How did I get unstuck? My wife worked at Northeastern University in Boston, and I'm embarrassed I don't remember the name of the lady who helped me, but someone in the career services office said she would meet with me. And I'd never actually talked to anyone about how to look for work.
Uh,
And
okay.
so she spent an hour saying, "Well, let's talk about your goals. You got to know how to do that. Have you ever do you know what informational interviews are? Have you ever done that? Here's how they work. Here are the kinds of people you should talk with." So it was a puzzle. She filled in the missing pieces.
Yeah.
Came away from that conversation saying, "Okay, what do I want to do next? I want to work in communications and government. Who do I know who does that kind of work?" Well, I because I'd worked with congressional offices, I knew people who could make introductions to
Right.
people who did that. And I had those conversations with people who were practitioners, not to ask them for a job, Tammy, but to say, "Okay, I want to do the kind of work you do. Tell me about a typical day. Tell
Right.
me about the kind of people who get hired. What makes them stand out? By the way, do you know of any upcoming opportunities? And who else should I talk to?" And
Right.
one conversation led to another,
Right.
and it was a lot more satisfying to do that than to just respond to newspaper ads.
And so what the career person at Northeastern really helped you to see was just to really sort of expand your toolkit for what it took to look for a job, even though your previous experience in securing employment really did involve networking and talking to people. I think I see this a lot in my coaching practice, where people will tell me, I got my last three jobs because I knew someone. And it's almost like they almost don't even recognize how to look for a job, because they 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 don't see that, oh, they actually did network. They don't even recognize that as networking. So yeah, it's almost like right in front of your face and you don't see it. And
It's such an important point you're making right now, because what I hadn't done was think about job hunting as a skill and studying it as a skill. And to your point, yes, the early success I had, one job did come from a newspaper ad, but I got the position in DC because I'd done an internship, and then I got the position in Boston because uh, I was leaving my job in DC. My colleagues threw me a going away party. And I know this sounds corny, Tammy, but I worked my way through my contact list. It was the 80s, it was a Rolodex. And I invited people to the going away party. And then I said, "By the way, do you know of any opportunities?" And someone told me about the job in Boston. So I made a cold call. But I was tapping into a network. I think your listeners, if they reflect on it, when they think about the jobs that they've enjoyed the most, or have had given them the most satisfaction, those have probably come to them through similar ways, like
yeah,
internships, referrals. And so, if you study job hunting as a skill, because you need to recognize you're going to change positions and probably careers a number of times, then you don't have to rely on you can make those kinds of opportunities happen by design.
right.
rather than just happenstance.
That's right. It's not, and I think that's a very good point. There is a skill, there is a method to it. It's not just a haphazard, oh, just talk to a bunch of people. There really is kind of a methodology around it. And it really does work. We know that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I say this respectfully. You don't want to take people out to coffee or ask to pick their brains. When you have these kinds of conversations, informational interviews or networking meetings, they're business meetings, and
Right.
you're in charge. You set the agenda, and you determine what the outcome is. Nobody walks into an important business meeting just winging it with
Right.
no agenda,
That's
uh,
right.
no time schedule. And your job search is one of the meetings that you take during a job search. Those are some of the most important appointments you'll have in your career.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. So I'm curious. So Boston to Portland, and somewhere in the middle there, you got your master's degree. What made you decide to go for the master's degree? And how did you end up in Portland?
I was about 10 years into my career, in about 30 years old, and I was beginning to compete with others in the for jobs who had master's degrees. So I thought it was important to have that credential. I also wanted to get formal training in some of the skills that I'd learned on the job: communications, electoral politics, as well as public management. I lived in Boston, so I knew people, especially in state government, who had gone to Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And like a lot of things in life, and I say this modestly, you meet people who've done something, and you realize, oh, I'm as smart as they are. I could do that. But I was able to put together a successful application. It was a great experience. And then my wife and I were in our early 30s. We thought we were still at that stage of life where we could imagine just throwing everything in the car and moving to a new place. So we did.
Oh,
And we came to Portland because of the quality of life.
that's great. And you've been there ever since.
We have. It was supposed to be 5 years, and it's been a lot longer than that.
Well, Boston misses you, I think.
It's a wonderful place. Yeah, I do get back there occasionally and always enjoy it.
I would love to talk about your life in Portland now and um, the company that you've established. I know you have a wonderful team of people who work with you and a fabulous podcast, Find Your Dream Job, and Max List and your regional job board. So tell us some about that and what are you up to these days?
Well, I came to Oregon to work in government and politics here. My first job was as communications director for a mayoral candidate, and that led to positions in state government in the capital. I was a spokesman for several agencies and then a speechwriter for a governor. But then uh, moved into nonprofit communications. And about 12 years ago, Tammy, I started my own public relations company that serves foundations, nonprofits, and government agencies. Along the way, I learned how important it was to network, and to me, networking is about being of service to others. And one of the ways I did that was sharing job postings. So when I left state government in 2001, I started sharing the occasional job posting that crossed my desk with former colleagues that I just wanted to stay in touch with. And I did that for almost a decade before I turned it into a kind of side business. And it grew informally by word of mouth, but by after almost 10 years, I had a list of 4,000 people who were getting my job postings. And at that point, I had to start charging for listings. And today we have a team of 6 people who work on what we call Max List. It's a regional job board that publishes about 700 job postings a month. But what distinguishes us from other job boards is not only our commitment to community service, but helping job seekers learn how to look for work as a skill, and also helping employers get better at hiring. Because for particularly small and medium-sized companies, hiring is often something that's assigned to somebody in addition to their regular responsibilities. They might only do it once or twice a year. Often they're not trained in interviewing. They don't. They're not quite sure how to write a good job posting, and they're unclear often about how to run an effective hiring process and communicate well with candidates. So, for both job seekers and employers, we provide lots of content on our website about how to get good at job hunting as a skill and how to get better at hiring as an employer. You'll find listings for Oregon and Washington. We serve the Pacific Northwest.
Oh,
And
okay.
then the content about hiring and job seeking is relevant to any candidate or hiring manager.
Oh, great. So we'll include links to all of those in our show notes then, because those are the kinds of resources I want to make sure that our listeners have access to. That's fabulous. And in terms of your PR company, are you working mostly with local organizations, or do you work with organizations elsewhere, internationally, or?
We have national and regional clients. So our biggest national client is the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in Princeton,
Oh,
New Jersey, and then we work with a number of foundations in Oregon,
mhm.
uh, some of the state's largest philanthropies, as well as local governments, counties, and cities here in the state.
Well, it sounds like a very rich and rewarding career today, and a rich and rewarding path that you've been on. And as we've I have learned through this journey of this podcast, nobody does it in a straight line, Mac.
They don't, do they, Tammy? And again, I want to emphasize I'm so grateful for the success I've had, but I've had my downs too. And I want to share a story. When I came to Oregon, I was out of, after I left City Hall, we lost the election. I was out of work, and it took me a while to find my next opportunity. And this is after I'd been polishing my job hunting skills, but I met with a fellow. He was the regional public affairs manager for Intel for Oregon, and he was kind enough to have coffee with me. And he said, you seem kind of down to me, and I think it's important for you to remember that our careers we think are going to be 45-degree angles. It just and just imagine that line at the 45-degree angle. But he said, in fact, in 30, 40 years, you're going to see peaks and valleys. And he
Yeah.
said, Mac, you're in a valley right now. You've had some peaks and you're going to have more peaks. But
Yeah.
just remember, don't expect it all to be peaks.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think as we go forward, though, and we gain some experience, we're able to navigate those peaks and valleys, hopefully with a little more ease and a little more insight as we go forward. So
I
that,
agree, Cami.
know,
And that's part of what drives us at a big part of what drives us at Maxless, because if you uh, get good at job hunting and career management as a skill early in your career and don't rely on trial and error to master those skills, you're going to have many more peaks and avoid the valleys.
right.
So it took me candidly about 15 years to figure it out. And I my colleagues and I want to help people avoid that and get good at job hunting and help employers get better at hiring so that people can do their best work and do it throughout their career and not have to wait until they master a job hunting skill in their 30s and 40s.
Right. Well, Mac, this has been an absolute delight to spend this time together and to have your advice and the wisdom of your experience. Are there any last pieces of advice that you would want to give our listeners that perhaps you haven't had a chance to share yet on the podcast?
Don't wait to be picked. I meet so many people, Tammy, who, when I ask them about a job search goal or what they might want to do next in their career, tell me that they want to work at this company or that nonprofit or on this project. And I say, well, who do you know there? And the person will often say, I don't know anybody there, but I look at the website every day. And you don't need permission to reach out to people inside as they begin to build relationships and learn about the needs of those companies or agencies. And that's how you find out about the jobs they offer and whether indeed that's the place you want to be. Because if you try to go through the front door alone through the website, and sometimes you have to apply formally, you're going to be competing with 50, 75, 100 other people.
Right.
And you don't have to wait for that posting to take action today.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. It reminds me of an email I got from somebody recently where they said something like, well, I guess I'll just wait and see what turns up. And I thought, well, I guess you're just going to be waiting for a while then. So great advice. Thank you so much, Mac. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Tammy. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Mac Prichard. He's a personal hero of mine. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his professional path and where he is today. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 057. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Mac, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find my page at tammygoulerloeb.com/Apple. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.